Hello, Kerry. Wait, Kerry read. Look at this. Kerry reading, guys. She was the one struggling to connect. This is really good that she's on. Hello, Kerry.
Hi! Finally!
You have to show your face.
I'm trying! Why is it not showing my face?
You might have a red line through your video.
Yeah, check. Hello. It took a million years for you to log in, but here you are. Yeah.
I'm here.
And we have Zintle. Hello, Zintle.
Hi.
Are you good?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, we're all good. Thank you so much. Yeah, beautiful. Okay. Ziggy, are you hitting record? Okay.
It's recording,
lovely.
isn't it? Go.
Okay, so I'm going to do just like an intro paragraph. And Petrus, would you mind, would you actually just mind praying for us for this online gathering?
All right, let's pray. Our Father, we thank you in this evening for gathering us in such a wonderful way, literally across the world. And I pray in this evening, Abba, that you will really also direct our thoughts, give us insight and wisdom, and also bring a revelation to us on this very important subject. I really also want in this evening, as Helmut was mentioning, with the tragic loss of life in Tilburg of the medical doctor, I really pray for his family and his immediate friends here, Lord, that are shocked about the senseless murder. I really pray that you will be the one also comforting them in this time of distress and uncertainty. Pray this in your wonderful name, Yeshua Mashiach, Jesus, our Messiah. Amen.
Yeah, amen. Thank you. Do you have any new people? Okay, guys, just for kindness, I think Ziglinda switches off the microphone. You can leave Petrus and mine on for the moment. Hello, Deborah. Welcome. So, guys, I need to apologize before we start. I said in some of the previous weeks that I was not going to discuss a topic, but the previous week, Emily from Los Angeles asked me, could we speak about the Torah? And when she said that, something in me went, I think this is very important. I think when we talk about Hebrew, there are so many interesting subjects, and I don't necessarily want to engage in, discussing a subject as if it's a standalone, whatever thing in the Bible. No subjects in the Bible are standalone. Everything, I believe, is interweaved and is connected in a way that is, almost too dangerous to address it as a subject. But we can all agree that when we speak about the law, we address something that is both contentious and in a number of ways it's scary for people because it's never really been unpacked well in Calvinism, or it's been addressed as a doom subject. And and a lot of what I think has become of our theology is built on that. So Petrus and I have decided, Petrus spearheads a group in Pretoria, and they're dealing with this subject. And last week, after we've had a meeting, him and I had a phone call, and we just decided that we're going to kind of do this together. So even if I'm going to do a little bit more of the presentation, it's really fantastic to have Petrus as kind of just a springboard and also just a witness on this whole subject. It is a difficult thing. And what I'm going to ask you is, just for a moment, when we talk about law tonight, that you open up to breathe in new information and breathe out some of the cultural static, the noise that we carry with us when we talk about this. I don't know if this is going to be a 2 or a 3 part or even more than that, but what I do want to say tonight is I really, really want to scratch the surface. As an introduction, I just want to read Psalm 19, verse 7. And by the way, this is not a standalone verse that sheds light on the subject. There's a number of these verses that talks about the law of God. Many of the translations uses the word law, and we'll talk about all of that. But just here, David says in Psalm 19 verse 7, the Torah of Yahweh, the usual translations, the law of Yahweh or the law of the Lord, is perfect. Perfect is the Hebrew word tam. It almost has the ring of being absolutely complete. In other words, it lacks nothing, right? So the Torah of Yahweh is perfect, bringing back the being, bringing back your soul. Some of the translations say the witness of Yahweh is trustworthy, making wise the simple. The orders of Yahweh are straight, rejoicing the heart. The command of Yahweh is clear, enlightening the eyes. That entire chapter is saturated with statements about Yahweh's law, which is just amazing. Why I'm reading this as an introduction, when we talk about the concept of law, what I have to highlight right from the beginning, there is a number of subjects that arise. I think if we treat tonight as the first part, some of the things we need to look at over the next 2 or 3 weeks, we need to talk about the Jewish understanding of law versus the Christian understanding of law. Some of it I will touch on tonight. When we talk about the Jewish understanding of law, there is this whole thing about what is behind the 10 commandments. And this whole strange meeting between Yahweh and Moses on the mountain, and Yahweh sending him back to the children of Israel with 10 important things. What is the 613 commandments that the Jewish people hangs onto and basically constructs their whole Judaism around? We're going to look at some of that. We're going to look at the whole idea of an old covenant and a new covenant. There's only one verse in the entire Testament that says that there will be another covenant after the covenant that Yahweh has with the Jewish people and with Abram. Again, very difficult subject, because if you talk about the covenant that God has with his people, what are we talking about? What is it? Is it the covenant with Noah? Because there's a covenant. Is it the covenant with Abram? Is it the covenant with the seed of Abram, with Isaac, with Jacob? There's so many repetitions of the covenant. But what I want to say is there is a single reference to the fact that there will be a new covenant, and that is in Jeremiah 31. We'll be looking at that. And it's why I'm saying that is there, Yahweh says that he will be writing the Torah or the law of God on their hearts. But we'll get round to that. And then obviously the most important, two most important subjects of the law is Jesus himself, Yeshua, saying in Matthew 5:17-19 that he did not come to destroy the law, the prophets. In fact, he's come to give it its best interpretation. By the way, this idiom is Hebraic. He says he's come to fulfill it. But in Hebrew, the idea of fulfilling something is giving its best interpretation. We'll look into that. And then obviously the whole Pauline theology, where it sounds at times as if he demonizes the law, and at other times he says, like in Romans 3 says, do we therefore nullify the law? He says no, we uphold it. So that's just some of the subjects we're going to look at. We're also going to look at the whole thing about the Jewish people having more than one law, for example. So just bear in mind, some of these things we will try to unpack systematically as we go. Petrus, you have a question?
Yes, I think from my side, Elmit, when we start this conversation tonight, for me it's quite important to just get a feel around the room, if I can use that term, or on the flat screen. What is your understanding of the word law in less than 30 seconds?
Yes,
you have to explain. If you have to explain the word law, so someone approaches you and say, Andries, please explain to me what law means. Okay, that is a good answer, Andries. Thank you. Meneer Kombrink, what would you say to someone if he says to you, law, what jumps up in your head? Just the first picture. Anyone on the screen. I'm going to just ask questions as we go along. So those that are videos off now, you know, so many times I've seen when you ask a question, suddenly everybody loses connection with a video and it goes dark all over. So you get to answer the iPhone and all sorts of funny words and names on the screen. So let's start. Mr. Komrink, if you have to answer, if someone asks you law, what would you answer? What is the picture that jumps in your head? Quick.
So each of us will have our own answer because of the journey that we've been on. But to me, when I think of law, I immediately think John 14 verse 15 because of my testimony. And that is the scripture where Yeshua says, if you love me, you'll keep my law, you'll keep my commandments. And I can elaborate a lot on that, but that is the first thing that jumps out.
So you have a verse jumping up. Brian, what's the picture that jumps up in your mind?
Well, from a biblical point of view, it's more of a set of loving instructions, trying to guide you where you should go. But from a political and from a worldly point of view, it's obviously rigid instructions which you have to follow, and what you have to abide to.
Okay, so I immediately pick up that you are saying that if we have the one pair of glasses we put on is that law is actually keeping us from stuff. It's actually very, if I can say, if you don't abide, no mask, no entry type of, that's a law. Okay, the country, if we do agree with it or not, that's not the point. The fact is no mask, no entry, law.
Correct.
Okay, anyone else? Christy, maybe from your side, the word law, what jumps up? What's the picture that jumps up in your mind?
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah, Christy. Yeah, the other Christy.
Oh,
like which one?
All the Christies.
All the Christies, yeah.
Yeah, I think the two sides of it. If I take it from as a covenant, it stands out different than if I use the word law. I mean, I struggle with the description of the word law for a covenant because ultimately what we have are more covenants, not one, several, rather than just a set of rules that, as we describe or we know of now as law. So I think I would use the word covenant instead. And a covenant has a different description, obviously. If you want to, from a legal perspective, what is law? What is a law or what is a covenant? They're different. Yeah.
All right. Two people more. Let me ask. Kerry, can I ask you, if the word law comes onto the table for discussion, what jumps up in your head? Unmute. You just have to unmute.
Okay.
Wonderful.
I'm back. Can you hear me? Okay.
Right. Yes.
I would say it's probably a system of rules and regulations put into place for the betterment of society as a whole. Okay. So it's instruction in order to maintain some sense of order for the best, the best order for the society to thrive, really.
Okay, wonderful. Ziggy, I'm going to give you the last opportunity before I just render a closing remark, and then Helmut will take us through the 613 laws. I hope you have a lot of pens and a lot of paper. What to keep and what not to keep. That is where we will start tonight. And it's a simple thing.
Oh, right.
Okay.
So remember the important one is like to not wear wool and linen together.
Oh. Then all of us are going to be naked on the screen, you know, no videos on in that case. Yeah, we can joke about those things, but, you know, this is not the conversation we're going to have tonight. I can assure you. Ziggy?
No, definitely.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to cheat because, I mean, I've spent basically 2 years studying this with Helmut. But I believe that is good instructions. It is something that says if you follow this, it will be good with your health, it will be good with your life, it will be good for your soul. So yeah, to me, it's just guidelines on really experiencing the household of God and what it means to be the son in the house.
Okay, Thanks, Ziggy. Okay, Helmut, over to you. I know you want to discuss from Genesis maybe that 4 words.
I want to discuss from Genesis to Revelation.
Yes. So we
I
will
hope you
keep
have
the
nothing else
600
on tonight.
Yeah, so the 613 will stay over to next time, and you will just do a Genesis to Revelation
Yeah,
explanation tonight. Okay, wonderful. Okay,
absolutely.
thanks.
Thank you, Petrus, for that question. Okay, so I know that the crowd tonight is fairly familiar that the English term law has a restrictive idea behind it, whereas the word that is chosen for the overarching group of God's regulations, instructions, his almost means direct. We'll dig into that later. First, just want to say something about the idea of restriction. In the West, when let's say I want to drive from one town to the other, and there's a little road mark that says I can only drive 60 kilos an hour, but I want to drive 80 or 90 or 150 kilos an hour. The idea is that this little signpost that's up that say you can't drive that fast imposes on me a restriction on my freedom, right? Something is now exercising a form of authority over what I would have rather wanted to do. Okay, so I'm just trying to think what the guy's name is. Dr. Who knows the guy who's just the Hebrew word pictures? Doctor, I can't remember his name now. It'll come back to me now. But anyway, so this one doctor that does a brilliant expose on it. And he says, let's, for example, say I drive a little van, you know, a little delivery van that has a, you know, exceptional height. And I just decide I'm just not going to care about bridges, about booms. I'm just going to drive this thing wherever I like. And next to the road, there's a little sign that says the next massive concrete bridge is 2.2 meters high. And I know my little van is 2.4 meters high. Would I consider that little sign as restrictive? Or would I go, no, had that sign not been there, you know, my delivery session might turn out quite bad, you know? And here, he used this example as, it's interesting how we would look at a signpost as restrictive, whereas if we only flip our viewpoint over to something like, it's a very stupid example, but you catch what I'm saying is, when I go with my little delivery van at 120 and I know it's 2.4 meters of pleasure that's going on the road, and suddenly there's a signpost say there's a bridge ahead and it's 2.2 meters high, I would jump on the brakes, right? Because something in me would go, that signpost is not restrictive. It's telling me something that could save my life. And I think if we stop for a moment and just pause and look at the word law, from that point of view, we have a starting point. Okay. In the West, the idea of a law is restrictive. While in Eastern philosophy, the idea that God would tell me what is good and bad and tell me what would happen if I do this or that is freedom. But it's interesting how psychologically and therefore spiritually for us, this idea of law is so negative. Now, I'm the first to admit the translation and the use of the word law from Genesis straight through to Revelation is a problem. And we will start looking at why this is a problem. And I hope that as we gently start to unpack some of the Hebraic ideas behind the very weird choice of words for law, that we will start to discover amazing freedom in the character of Yahweh and why he actually put out a number of things. I'm going to ask you to move forward with me very, very gently. And I think let us start in Genesis 26. The chapter of Genesis 25 ends with this interesting selling of the birthright between Esau and Jacob. And then suddenly in chapter 26, we're back with Yitzchak, it's their father Isaac, and it starts as following, 26 verse 1. And there was scarcity of food in the land, besides the first scarcity of food, which was in the days of Abraham, or Avraham in Hebrew. And Yitzchak, Isaac, went to Avimelech, my father is the king, sovereign of the Philistines in Gerar, And Yahweh appeared to him and said, do not go down into Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim is Egypt. Do not go down into Egypt. Live in the land which I command you. Verse 3, sojourn in this land, and I shall be with you and bless you. And we've looked at what the word bless means last week. It means I will present you with a gift for your life. I will be with you and I will bless you, for I give all these lands to you and to your seed. And I shall establish the oath which I swore to Abraham your father. Verse 4, and I shall increase your seed like the stars of the heavens, and I will give all these lands to your seed. And in your seed all the nations of the earth shall be blessed. And then, very important here, verse 5, because Abraham obeyed my voice and guarded my charge, my commands, my laws, and my Torah. They've already used up the powerful word, my laws and my Torah. Actually, most translation translates the word law or Torah as law. So it would have said my laws and my laws. But anyway, 4 incredible Hebrew words used to explain some of the grit that Yahweh provides us from Genesis to Revelation. Different nouns that has very specific and very different meaning is summarized here in the first time that we read of the law in the Bible, Genesis 26, by the way. It's the first time that the word Torah appears in the Bible, isn't this? And then it occurs with the 3 other. I find this fascinating. We don't hear this because the English translations doesn't necessarily help us to hear that the 4 strong terms occur together in one sentence, because it doesn't really happen anywhere else. And anyway, the first time that we hear the word Torah, which is this translation, which is the scriptures, which I love, it keeps on translating law as Torah. And this, by the way, is super helpful when you read the Bible and it says Torah, especially. And then that whole negative, restrictive idea of law is out the window. What we're going to do tonight is we're going to look at 4 nouns describing the 4 types of laws, and we're going to look at 2 verbs. And let's just start with the verbs, because the verbs is not really our focus here. He says here, because Abram obeyed the voice of the Lord and he guarded, and then it names the 4 categories of nouns, all the different types of laws. Obey and guard. The word for obey in Hebrew is the word Shema. Okay, for those who can write a little bit of Hebrew, it's a shin, a mem, and an ayin. Okay, it's the word Shema. It usually gets translated as hear. For example, in Deuteronomy 4 verse 6, it says, hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one. That idea of hear is a very, very Greek and a very non-Hebraic way of putting it. In Hebrew, there is no such thing as you only hear. It doesn't mean anything in Hebrew. You cannot hear without acting on your hearing in Hebrew. Therefore, the word Shema is best translated, hear and act upon your hearing, O Israel. Okay? This normally gets translated where the translators realize you can't just say hear, it's not strong enough in English. Then they substitute the word hear for the word obey. Okay? Again, obey in our culture has a negative connotation. Agreed? It's very much the same as law, because if you have to obey, it feels like somebody's going to punish you if you don't do it. So it's very weighty. But if you just look at what the word obey, Shema, means, it means here is something that's presented audibly to you, and what's required of you is just to react upon that which you hear. Okay, Shema. So it says, because Abram Shema my voice. So he heard the voice of Yahweh and he acted upon what Yahweh said. And secondly, and guarded, this is the word, very interesting, the word Shamar. Okay? The Shamar usually is translated in English as the word to keep something. For example, in Exodus 2 verse 20, it says to, keep the Shabbat. Remember and keep the Shabbat. Keep, again, has a very obvious English meaning, which is the positive one, and it has a not so obvious English meaning that's negative. Keep, again, sounds like you have to obey it. You have to do these things, otherwise stuff will go wrong. But if we just look at the positive side of the word Shamar, it means keep, it means hold it in. Put a hedge of protection around it. By the way, the image behind Shamar comes from the shepherds that had the small flock of sheep or big flock of sheep at night. And they had, for example, a stone pen where all the sheep was pushed in. And then the sheepfold, okay? That idea of the thorns being put on the rim of the pen or the sheepfold was to keep out the wild animals and you know, whatever thieves that could climb over the wall and steal the sheep or hurt them. That idea of putting thorns around it was to literally hold it in, hold the sheep safely together. And then obviously Yeshua goes one beautiful step further and he says, and then there's still the gate and I'm sitting at the gate. I'm looking after the entrance. Okay, but this whole idea of putting thorns around a sheepfold so that the sheep could sleep safely and not even care about the night, and the shepherd would keep up and stay awake and watch that nobody enters through the gate. That is the idea of the verb shamar. Okay, so Shema, which means hear and act upon your hearing, and shamar, which means to keep in, to literally hold it safe. By the way, just as a side note on the word shamar, the Bible tells us to keep the Sabbath. And just as a side note, what is so beautiful about this word, basically what Yahweh says is almost put a collection of thorns around it so that nothing takes its place, so that nothing climbs over this proverbial wall and steal the Shabbat from you and steal this so needed day of entering into the goodness and the beauty of Yahweh. There's an interesting choice of words that it doesn't say whatever, do the Shabbat, because there's a verb for do, it's the verb asa, but it doesn't say do the Shabbat, it says keep it. Put thorns around it so that nothing steals it from you, because you need it, it's good for you. Okay, those are the two verbs. Bear them in mind as we go along. Those are, by the way, the only two verbs that you need to know when it gets to the Hebrew understanding of the four nouns that we will now look at. If we page to Genesis 26 verse 5, because Abram Shema my voice and Shamar, and then it mentions the four. The four words occurs as follow. Okay, and before we dig into it, the only thing that we're going to do tonight is just hear what the Hebraic understanding is of these four terms that's being used. I don't want to say randomly, because that's absolutely not the truth, but they are used in a way that you always need to take into account that there's context. All right? And these are the four words that's used interchangeably: Torah, Mishmeret, Chuka, and Mitzvah. By the way, there is a fifth word. It's called Piqud, and that occurs only in the Psalms. It means the precepts. You'll very often hear that David says that. What if I could find a quick example of it? I find delight in your precepts. David says that a lot. In Psalm 119 verse 45, he says, your Piqud gives me liberty. It broadens my space in my mind. Beautiful expression. But by the way, the word Piqud, precept, is very much the same as the word Chuka. It only occurs poetically in the Psalms, interestingly. So let's get back. So just bear that in mind. There is another word, but we're going to look at these four terms and then just see what's going on there. By the way, when we talk about law as an overarching concept, I have to start by saying the following. We briefly said the Jewish people don't hear a negative, they don't hear something negative in law, because for them it's the fact that Yahweh cares enough for us to tell us what's going on in this world and what's our boundaries. It makes him a good God. For example, a simple explanation would be, if you have a rugby game or a football game and you feel, it's very restrictive, all these lines and like only two poles, and you have to follow all these rules. Let's remove one side of the field and let's move the goalpost 100 meters into the bush. Do we have freedom now? No, we have chaos. But the fact that there is boundaries and proper rules by which to play the game absolutely opens up the ability to experience freedom and the enjoyment of exercising your freedom within confines and within boundaries. So just bear that in mind, as that is more the Jewish understanding of it. It's not that rules and laws imposes restrictions. It imposes the ability on us to actually express freedom. All right. Now, here's a very important thing. The word Torah, which is mostly translated as law. In fact, most English translations, if you read the word law, is translating the word Torah for you to the word law. Now, what I want to say about Torah sometimes it's only the word Torah, and sometimes Torah is divided into Mishmeret, Chuka, and Mitzvah. And we'll discuss them now. But I want to start with Torah because this is the problematic term. Okay, and then we'll dig into a little bit of detail into the others. The word Torah comes from the Hebrew verb Yarah. Okay, and Yarah is literally in Hebrew means to point with a finger. So, and the idea comes from, let's say I'm a coach and I'm teaching somebody to be an archer. The bow and how the arrow into the fingers, and then to put it into the bow and aim, and literally as I teach them how to point with my finger so that it forms a straight line with the arrow and get all the fine muscle control, and teach them what's the best time to release the arrow. That whole action is the verb Yarah. It literally means to point out with a finger. And if the absolute essence of the verb Yarah is to help a student or help somebody that's new in a craft to actually move closer to the perfection of that craft. All right. So it has a full-on parental coach, fill in the gaps. You get what I'm saying? It's absolutely the heart of somebody wanting to help the next person to get it right. Yarah. And the word Torah is the noun form of pointing out with a finger, and the best English translation for Torah is the word instruction. Okay? Why the translators choose to use the word law is baffling to me, to be very frank, especially in the light of our culture that understands from the word law a negative or has a negative connotation to that word. But from here and henceforward, by the way, get yourself one of these if you don't have the scriptures, right? Like these. It's not the best translation in the world, but what they do get right is they don't translate the word Torah as law. It says Torah everywhere. And if you know that the heart behind loving instruction, which is the heart of the Father has no agenda not to teach us lovingly and not to instruct us lovingly. If you know that and you read wherever it occurs, the Torah, my Torah, you get the idea that God cares. Whereas you read the word law and it feels like God is trying to restrict me. Doesn't make sense. Okay, so just bear in mind the word Torah is almost the overarching word over all of the finer details. Now, a number of remarks at the word Torah. Some people refer to the Torah as the 5 books of Moses. All right. Some people refer to the Torah as everything except the prophets and the poetry. Some people refer to the Torah as the entire Hebrew scriptures. Those are cultural inundations that we kind of need to deal with. When it speaks about the Torah in the New Testament and it points back to the Torah, it is speaking almost mostly to God's intervention for the nation of Israel through Moses. Okay, and that's why I'm saying let's pause that. We're not going to go into that. We'll get into that. But bear in mind, the word Torah is everything about teaching a subordinate how to do something well and actually get it right. It's the heart of a father. There's no malice in it. There's no restriction in it. It is absolutely just to help. Now, when we dig into the other words, we're now going to divide into what I would say almost, and the Bible is not saying this is my opinion, but it's almost the levels of awareness that you find for the nation of Israel as an example, and then also if we extrapolate it to how we do the world, our level of awareness when we think of how God deals with us. I'm going to make it very practical. So bear in mind, Torah is the first overarching. It means the loving instruction of the Father, and it comes from the word Yarah, which means to point with a finger, to teach somebody you should. By the way, this is an interesting remark. The word sin, okay, and the Bible actually, the New Testament actually defines sin as lawlessness. And I'm going to ask Johan, where's it written? John 5, 2 John? You must know that. 1 John 5, 24, 14, which says that sin is lawlessness. Who knows where that is written?
Well, it's not 1 John 3 verse 4 maybe.
Oh, I think you're absolutely right. Let's just double. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's 1 John 3 verse 4 says, sin is lawlessness. Now, the word for sin, we'll get to sin. Sin is not the focus point tonight. But the overarching word for sin is the word Chata. It's the sin also has three subjugates. But Chata means that you aim for something, you try it, and you miss. You miss the mark, literally. The Bible, if it speaks about sin, doesn't say you're evil. It says you did something and you missed the mark. And this is connected to this whole idea of trying or not trying, but there's an instruction that had to be followed, and there's a target, and the target was missed. And then, the Bible then, for example, there's a form of sinning that is bending the truth. There's another form of sinning that is actually intentionally rebelling against God in the face of knowing what is good and what is right. But we'll get into that maybe on the next one. But just bear in mind that when we talk about the Torah and sin, there's this connection of a target. This whole idea of teaching an archer how to shoot, to how to aim the arrow at the target and then missing it. All right? The intentionality and how things go wrong, that we'll discuss on another evening. But now I want to just talk about some of the three subdivisions that the Torah gives to us. The first one is Mishmeret. Mishmeret is the participle form, for those interested in the language, of the word Shamar, which we've already discussed. The verbal form Shamar, actually Mishmeret is the female word of the male word Mishmar, which means a prison. But it's also, again, the translators and even Strong's Concordance, they don't map it out well. You have to go back to the verb, which means to put a hedge of protection around it. So I can understand that the male word, mishmar, sounds like a prison. It sounds like something holds you in. And in Hebraic understanding, it's the truth. It could be a prison, but the female word, mishmeret, means a keeping, a protection of. All right, you have to go back to the original, putting thorns around a little pen. So that's the first word, mishmeret. It's not used a lot in the Bible. In fact, the other two, Chuka and mitzvah, is the ones we hear most of the time. And those are the ones I actually want to spend a little bit more time on. The idea of God giving commandments to Israel, the single form is mitzvah and the plural form is mitzvot. And very often the Jews refer to the 613 mitzvot, the commandments. All of that is not, by the way, the truth. And we'll dig into that some of the other evenings. What exactly does it mean for the Jewish people? And what does it mean for us? But just bear in mind, a mitzvah is a commandment. What's opdracht in Engels? Is it a commandment? An assignment almost. What's opdracht in English? Petrus?
Yeah,
Instruction.
Instruction, I think, is a better. Yeah. So if I give you.
That's okay. So instruction is not strong enough. A commandment is as follows. You have a kid. The baby is 1 year old. You have a kitchen finely decorated with a new stove, hot plates and everything, and your poor little 1 year old has no sense of self-awareness, doesn't understand heat transfer, the laws of thermodynamics, and basically you tell your 1 year old, Chantal?
As die woord vir opdrag nie order nie, I give you an order.
You're right, that is the right word. It is giving somebody an order. Yeah, okay. It's stronger. You tell you tell your 1 year old, I'm just using it as an example, do not touch the hot plate. Are you trying to be rude to your 1 year old? No. No, you're trying to really make them understand that do they touch the hot plate, a much worse thing will happen to them than they getting spanked or whatever. It's a commandment not to touch the hot plate. And the reason why that is a commandment is there is no form of self-awareness and there's no form of recollection of how dangerous it is. You as a parent have to tell the kid, don't touch it. Okay, and if the kid goes to that, they get a spanking on the hand or whatever the case may be, because the kid needs to learn that it's a no. That is the red line. You don't touch it. But the heart behind it is to protect your poor little 1 year old to touch the hot plate. Okay, that is a mitzvah. if we extrapolate that to the, sorry, Jean Viet's gesê. Do you want to say something?
Nee, glad nie. Ek hoop
Oh,
net nie
sorry,
ek
I
is
thought-
te distracting nie, want ek braai terwyl ek luister hier. Sorry.
Oh, not a problem. No, I thought you were saying because you could at any time stick up your hand. Now, so just taking this concept of don't touch the hot plate and you extrapolate that to the nation of Israel. Here you have a bunch, 100,000 men, the Bible say, with their women and their children, let's say 3 million, who knows, but millions of people suddenly encamped around the mountain, and God says, okay, guys, here is what you're going to do and don't do. God gives them commandments. Why? Because he's trying to inflict restrictions on them? No. They don't know who God is. They don't know nothing about traveling. They don't know nothing about hygiene. If you have like a couple of million people cruising through the desert, they know nothing. They don't know Moses. They know nothing. They're just this community of 3 million people that's got more Egypt in them than them being in Egypt. And girls is how it's going to work. He gives commands. Okay? This is not because he wants to do anything else than say, you will learn over time why I did this. But for now, the only thing you need to know is that I'm saying no for this and yes for that, because you need to learn, and you will over time start realizing that my character is good and my character is to protect you. Okay? Let's take it back to the example of your kid, your 1-year-old. Let's say your 1-year-old makes it successfully to 5. Is it now a good idea to touch the hot plate? No. Your kid now grows up and becomes a teenager. Is it now a good idea to touch the hot plate? No. But when your kid grows up and becomes a teenager in 20 and 30 and 50 and 60 and 500, it's always a bad idea to touch the hot plate. But if you've been trained well with a commandment, you grow up in freedom that is not a good thing to touch. You don't go as a teenager, I'm not allowed to touch the hot plate. No. At that time, you've learned that you don't touch the hot plate, and you cook your food. And every now and again, I mean, Ziggy and I stayed in this house, and I've touched the hot plate a number of times, and I've touched hot bricks outside when I was cooking. Like, it's like a guy who doesn't learn. But the fact of the matter is, I know it's good because I've learned. I don't exercise it always, and this is the heart behind mitzvah. Okay, God telling the children of Israel, you will understand later. Trust me now. I'm saying no for this. I'm saying yes for that. Your awareness simply wouldn't allow you to see anything else. Another example, we have what do you call it? Thinners, like cleaning, alcoholic cleaner in your house. Mom telling a 1-year-old, don't touch it and don't drink it. It's poisonous, okay? Now the kid grows up, and when it becomes 12 and 21, is it now a soft drink? No, it's still poison. You may not die of it at 21, but, you know, thinners and turpentine and whatever is not suddenly a newly incorporated soft drink in the house, or, you know, something. No, it remains poison. But it required a mitzvah in the household to say, don't touch it. Kid. And the kid grows up and saying, Mom and Dad, I have respect for them, and when I did touch it, I got a hiding. I don't see that as anything else, as it's not a good idea to drink it, especially not a good idea to drink it. Does it make sense? This is the heart behind God giving the children of Israel mitzvot, okay? Commandments. Chuka is translated as ordinance. Now, the best way to discern between a chuka and a commandment is as follows. Let's say I have a company, and we have 5 people working in the company, and we have a little plate up at the door where we stipulate our values and basically the house rules for how we will operate in this business. Okay, something maybe, I'm just going to use stupid examples. I mean, we all very clever. One of them might be, when we're with clients, we don't smoke. We don't smell like smoking. That might be a house rule. One house rule would be, like, we try to be seriously polite when we have people over in the boardroom. One thing might be, we all save energy in this building. You know, whatever the list of things might be that we agree on in this company, as to say that we all keep to, these are the ordinances, how we run the internal health of this business. And you can apply the same to your personal household, to your family's household. Some of the things are not commandments. Some of the things are just really good ideas that we all agree to, we all adhere to, because this will make first of all, it gives us a sense of identity, a sense of collective identity. It gives us a sense of, wow, we all look after this household in a manner and in a code that really looks after the health of this thing, house rules, in other words. Okay? But both Chuka and Mitzvah, and this we include Mishmeret, falls under the bigger umbrella of Torah, which means the loving instruction of the Father. Does it make sense? And basically, boys and girls, these are the four, and there's one more term, Piqud, like we said, that occurs in the Psalm, but Piqud is the same as Chuka. It means house rules, where David just goes on to say, it's really good to be in your household because your household runs well. It's healthy. It's done in a way that you tell us how to run it because you know better, because you're loving. You are chesed. You actually know how to look after us from a marital, loving commitment point of view. We don't. So what do? We adhere to the Piqud. We adhere to the Chuka. We adhere to the ordinances and the precepts of Yahweh. But what you need to take out of tonight is simply to say, God deals with us in the way that our almost spiritual, I'm not going to use the word spiritual, our almost just basic awareness of where we are in life, where is he in life, who is God, who are we, how deep do we allow him in our lives, how deep do we actually follow God? Those things determine whether we use the word Chuka or mitzvah. Sure, there are some mitzvot, which is the female plural of the word mitzvah. There are some mitzvot which we may never understand in our lives. And you know what? That's okay. If God tells us a yes or a no, and we can trust that it falls under the overarching umbrella of his good, loving, fatherly instructions, who cares if we understand? It's really great if we can walk with God and he teaches us these things and we go like, oh, wait, now I understand why the hot plate was a bad idea. And now I'm so happy that you told me no when I was 1 year old. Does it make sense? But as we grow older, imposing restrictions on us, but actually liberating us from ourselves. We're the problem. We're the self-inflicting, pompous, prideful individuals who wants to say, thank you for your suggestion, God, but I'll just do what I like. Well, we just thank you very much for your, look at Adam and Eve. We're none the better. We're all the same. God says, don't touch of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And what do they say? Yeah, but it was really good to look at and it was good for food. And also when we would have eaten it, we would have been wiser. So that's why we did it. Can you see the pattern? So that's what we do. We say to God, we hear you. Thank you for telling us all these festivals and the Shabbat, but thank you, but no thank you. We've thought about it and we'll just do what we like. This is kind of the human response. And I think very often, if we would sit with the knowledge and realize that it's a loving God that gives us loving instructions because he cares and because he knows better and because he has an overarching plan of seeing the best come out of us, I think it would be easier to say, wait a moment, if God says something, maybe we should just stop analyzing it and stop trying to first understand it before we obey it and go, you said it, we do it. Make sense? And this is, boys and girls, tonight's introduction. What I'm really just encouraging everybody is, and Petrus, you'd ask you something. Sorry, the chat comes up and then okay, yeah.
Maybe
this is why.
Yeah, maybe just a remark on the past weekend, very important festival, and I think people can maybe lose by just keeping the festival, actually just the broader meeting, because it's such a beautiful, after what you've explained, actually an expression of what this living Torah being written in our hearts.
Absolutely. Thank you, Petrus. Actually, when Petrus and I discussed tonight, I said to him, this is a good way to start the conversation. I've completely forgotten about it, but this is being me. It's really hard. So it's
a good way to end it.
Yeah. Let's wrap it and say, let's look at, for example, the past week was the festival of Shavuot. I don't know who's aware of Shavuot, the festival of weeks. Anybody did something or some people? Okay. So just in a nutshell, we'll go into some of this on another evening. And by the way, I don't know who remembered, but about 2 months ago, we did a whole evening on the 7 festivals. So I don't want to recap too much on Shavuot, but just to color in the point of tonight, the Shavuot festival, for example, is a mitzvah in one sense, although in a number of other places it calls it a decree or an ordinance, a chuka. It means God says, this is how my household runs, just like, let's just all agree on this. This is family vibes. Okay, we all agree that we're going to do this because it helps the whole household and we all benefit from it. But the idea of God telling the children of Israel to celebrate this feast, we very often think of it, and again, this is now the divide between tonight and the next night. We often think, but those things, although whatever the meaning might be and whatever God meant by it was meant for the Jews, right? Fast forward to the chapter 2 of Acts, and remember when Yeshua went up in the cloud and the angel that stood there and said, hey man, what are you waiting for? He'll come back the same way, what's prophesied in Zechariah. But then the last words that Yeshua spoke to the disciples is to say, wait in Jerusalem. Just hang around in Jerusalem. And then the Bible relays in chapter 2 of Acts, it says when they were together in this upper room, wherever that exactly was, it says very clearly it was on the day of Shavuot that they were together. And very often people argue, but when Jesus died, all of the Old Testament laws were made away with. Here you have, after Jesus' death, after his resurrection, after his, what's the English word? Hemelvaart, his
Ascension.
Thank you. And here the Jews didn't suddenly go and say, no Shavuot for us because Jesus died, Jesus fulfilled the feast. Not even he died, he was raised, he was ascended. No, they were together on Shavuot after Jesus was gone. So their clear understanding was that this instruction that was given to the Jewish people was still applying to them. Now, they were Jews, but they were also saved Jews. They were Jews that has fully committed to the cause and the call of Christ. And they were together on Shabbat. And as you know, on this beautiful fulfillment of a harvest festival, the Spirit of God was poured out. And we all know the story. I mean, the whole book of Acts basically is a beautiful extrapolation of that fulfillment of the prophecy of Joel. But looking back over this last week that we celebrated and commemorated Shavuot, this is a beautiful example of how it really becomes very easy to listen to God and do it because it comes from a place where we believe that he's busy with something that we can trust. And we can not only trust it, but entrust ourselves to this process of learning to hear him, learning to obey. Again, back to the 2 verbs, learning to Shema and learning to Shamar. Learn to hear and act upon our hearing, and learn to put a hedge of protection around the things that God deemed valuable. So is that enough, Peter? So you can go deeper into Shabbat. Is that good? Guys, does it make sense? And is it helpful? So again, I'm actually asking you guys if your Bible translations speak about law. And by the way, we will, in our next meeting, look at the Jews have more than one law. We'll look at that because this is important. And it's also important to understand when Paul refers to the law, he's not always speaking about the Torah. He's sometimes speaking to the other law, which is the law of the Jews. Okay. And by the way, there's a lot of laws. There's the law of sin and death, and there's the law of this and that. We'll look at some of these things in our next gathering. But what I want to send you into this week is, remember the overarching term Torah. It's a loving instruction of a father that teaches us how to shoot an arrow. Okay, and it comes from the verb to point out with the finger. It's literally the heart of an instructor, of a teacher. Mishmeret means stuff that you keep in because that's what you do. Okay, there's not a lot of examples of Mishmeret, but it is one of the words that the Bible here says, because you guarded my Mishmeret. So it is important to God. Chuka, an ordinance, house rules. Remember the whole idea of your family. How do you do your household? When you have friends coming to visit in school and they come to your house, they don't do as they do in their house. They do as they do as you do in your house. Okay, house rules. Chuka. And mitzvah, commandments, telling don't do this and do this simply because you don't have awareness, you don't have understanding. but it all falls under the loving umbrella of Yahweh's Torah. Amen. Makes sense. Okay, you can unmute your stuff. You can anything, any contributions, anything. Rock and roll.
Helmut, can you explain again about precepts? Because I think I missed that part. I quickly.
The thing is, necessarily means an ordinance. The word Chuka and the word Piqud are both gets translated and interchangeably as precepts, ordinances. I mean, if you go to a Strong's Concordance and you dig up the word Chuka or Piqud, it'll use a number of English words, whatever is your your preference. But the idea behind it is literally God saying, this is how my house this is how my house is run. So I would say, hello, Senga. You've missed a little bit, but there will be a link, a recording. Okay, does it make sense, Ilse?
Ja, dankie. Dis waar hy dan
Yeah, so basically, I just want to say the word Piqud and Chuka in Hebrew. And by the way, Petrus and I have talked. I wish I had like cameras and stuff and I can write. We have a lady in here who teaches maths, and she has like on a Zoom call a camera that was on it. Like, that's something I should look at. But yeah, we've got it. Chuka, family or house rules. Anybody else?
Hey,
Yes,
Helmut, I
Helmut.
have a question. Go for it.
Okay, I'll quickly ask. Helmut, the second unmute. There are three other words that I always remember that, years ago you and I spoke about it. The word Chata or Chata, Avon, Pesha, and Yetzirah. Like, you didn't really touch on those, but the interesting thing is, and I don't know where this comment comes from, but I made a note on my Mac, actually in 2016, I see I made this note, and I just quickly want to read this to you guys, which is quite a nice explanation of the different types of sin that is explained there. So it's a one paragraph. Sin in Hebrew, Chata, is seen best in the picture of an archer who aims at the target, the righteousness of God, and has every intention of hitting it and simply misses for whatever reason. The intent is to hit the target. Rebellion, in Hebrew the word Pesha, is knowing the target God desires one to aim at, and instead deliberately aims at another target. So the intent is to actually miss. Which is correlated to rebellion. So one very difficult aspect of our faith is watching brothers assign a rebellious intent to one who is actually trying to hit the actual mark.
Yeah. And did you say, okay, so just Jean is now explaining something that I want to touch on the next round. I deliberately did not want to speak about sinning tonight. No, but thank you. This is brilliant. And this is something that can now sit in the subconscious. There's one you left out, Avon, just because you've talked about Chata. And Chata is the overarching idea of missing the mark, whereas Torah is the idea of God's loving instruction with some other words underneath that. Same thing with Chata. Chata means to sin. Avon means to twist the truth. It means to bend, actually. So it means that I tell you the story, but I omit something out, which now makes the story open for interpretation, which could be misleading. But so the Bible said, or actually I've studied this whole idea of Avon versus Pesha quite a bit back in the days. The one sounds like it's not necessarily like intentionally trying to be evil, but I'm omitting something, so I'm bending the truth. Okay, and God has a very big problem with Avon, but it sounds like rebellion is the problem, where you know the consequences, you know God doesn't want it, and you continue to pursue, like you rightly said, the wrong target. But we'll just affirm this next week. By the way, you talked about the word yetzer hara. Yetzer hara means the inclination. I don't think the Bible actually ever uses it as a phrase, yetzer hara. Yetzer hara means the inclination towards wrong. And the Jewish sages says that every human has in them the yetzer hara, in the almost the innate pull away from God. And that is that's philosophy, although we can all agree basically the Bible hints that this is what we do. Want in a healthy way. Sometimes we want to please him, but in an unhealthy way, like the whole Calvinistic theology addresses that. But yeah, an inclination towards evil is a yetzer hara. Thank you, Joan. Stefan.
Hey, Helmut. What I wanted to ask was just to clarify what you meant by the Torah being an umbrella term for all of these words that you've been using. Is that to say that you would define Torah using those words, or like maybe one analogy I can use is, I know very little about psychology, but what I do know is that you get personality traits, like someone might be conscientious, and then that will have sub-traits, like that person is diligent and they're dutiful and they like to achieve things. Could you understand it in that way, where it's like almost like a trait with sub-traits?
Stefan, I want to keep it very simple. It literally means, it tells you something about the heart of God, where God is in himself a loving Father that wants to guide and instruct us on our lives, on our journey's passage, to become more like him, become more like Yeshua. The heart behind it is the correct understanding of Torah. How it plays out in context, in different verses and in different Bible stories, it might have something like more of a direct instruction, or it might refer to the overarching desire of God that we be more like his intention for us. But I wouldn't call it a trait. I would call it literally, the best word for it is instruction. So
Okay,
it is the noun form of somebody teaching you. Okay. And whereas the English translation, calling it a law, just feels like it's not hitting the target. Excuse the pun.
Yeah. And just to clarify, I don't necessarily mean that it is a trait, but kind of in the same way that you might have sub-traits of a trait. Is that what you mean by those words are aspects of an umbrella term?
Yeah. So what I'm saying is a mitzvah, although it's a stronger and it's almost a more parental. Help me with words, somebody. But it's almost a way of saying don't do this. It's almost more fear-driven on the side of the one receiving it. It's like, I must really listen to this guy. Although mitzvah is a more stronger term, but it's aimed at a person who doesn't have enough awareness yet. It still falls under the category of loving instruction. So a mitzvah is always also loving instruction. So in that sense, you're absolutely right. It falls under the category of loving instructions, but it is a more, I don't have kids, but those who have kids around would know, like if you educate your child not to do stupid things like eat stones, try to climb over a fence with spikes, that's the category where the parents go like, don't. But it falls under the same category as I do. I come across very strong because I care, and I do this absolutely from a place because I want the best for you. That's the thing. A Chuka, which is like more house rule, ordinance of how do we do God's kingdom, the same thing, falls under the chuppah, the umbrella of God's loving instructions, because he cares. It points to his character, at bottom line.
Right.
Good.
Actually, something that would be really helpful is, would it be possible to share these words? I know they're not English, but
for sure.
I don't know.
Let me try.
Even if it's in the chat or something, or on the WhatsApp group.
How do I chat to everybody? Because now I have
Druk die groen knoppie.
Share. No.
There's a chat on the menu, and then if you chat to everyone, it should go to everyone.
And please on the chat.
Oh, there we go. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, let me type out these words quickly. Okay, so there's rules in Hebrew. They're called the rules of transliteration. I may not have them completely, but under the knie, but here they go. So this is the word Torah. Okay, comes from Yarah, which means to point with the finger. All right. The word meat. This is another thing. How do you write meats? Mitzvah. Plural is mitzvot. It means commandments. Okay. And the word Chuka. Now, how do we spell Chuka? K. Like that. Means ordinances. Decrees. I'm just going to call it house rules because that's the easiest for us. When the Bible speaks of decrees, it's, it makes sense to us because we go like, stuff to do. But if you go like, no, it's God telling them this is how we operate in this camp. It's a house rule. And you'll find out, if you don't know it immediately, you'll find out that it's good. And then there was the other one, Chuka, Mitzvah. Oh, thank you. Look at that. Flap. Check. Andries. What did you get? Yeah. Check. Yetzirah. Yeah, Yetzirah. I'm just going to quickly tell you. This is how it's spelled like this. Yetzirah. Yetzer is an inclination or a drive, and hara is towards the wrong or towards the. You talk, I type. Lekker Andries man. Vannacht spoed. When on thin ice, speed is of the essence. Okay, so did we miss one? Oh, the other one is Mishmeret. I'm just going to write you Mishmeret, and this comes from the verb Shamar, which means to hedge in or put up hedge of protection. Cooms, flap. There we go. Does it make sense? Chuka, I don't know if that's the right transliteration. It does have a double Q because I have a dot in Hebrew. So it's Chuka, Torah, Mitzvah, mitzvot, yeah, and Mishmeret. Awesome.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I know. You're welcome, man. That was a good idea. That's actually a good idea. I should try to write that as I speak. Petrus, do you have any concluding remarks, or anybody else having more questions?
No, Helmut, I think from my side, what is great, and I think we all appreciate that, is that we sometimes have only one word that describes so much. And we try and use that one word because we do not know the context, the history, and the background of the language. And then we are trying to describe things that actually confuses us. If you think about the words like the 10 Commandments, if you have to truly translate it in how it's supposed to sound, it is the 10 weighty matters. And the word commandments have been added, due to people not being able to understand what weighty matters actually meant in the context and culture. So thank you very much. It also helped me a lot tonight again, to hear this.
Thank you, Petrus. Okay, and you make me think that I want to conclude this evening by saying, can you now understand the immense problem of the phrase "under the law"? Does it sink in? Because if you have a negative association with law, yes, then the term "we're not under the law" is almost the term that rescues you from this problematic God. But imagine you say we're not under the Torah. That becomes a hectic problem. So that I'm leaving you with, and this is our introduction for the next one, because Paul says we're not under the law. What does he mean by that? And we're going to unpack that in the next one. By the way, Petrus, thank you very much for calling out the 10 Commandments. I deliberately did not touch on commandments because the word commandments doesn't even occur in that sentence, like you rightly pointed out. It literally says aser devarim. It means the 10 matters, the 10 weighty matters. I mean, it's so sad that we put the word commandments to it. That would have been, if it said asher mitzvot, we could have said, okay, guys, now we're going to like listen very attentively, because God is trying to tell us that we don't really understand yet, but just listen to him. But it doesn't even, it's not that. He says, these are 10 very important things, very close to my heart. We will start with that basically next week. Look at the 10 weighty matters and briefly unpack them. I actually want to send you something to watch before next week. It's going to make it very easy for us. Did my subconscious seek for his name?
No, I say something, Owen.
Oh, go ahead, please.
Just on the 10 Commandments, obviously, because the last portion was touching on that. It's very interesting. I was busy watching a brief teaching from a very can I say beloved mentor of mine, that's passed away last year, and some of you might know him. But old video that he made from about 12 years ago, and he unpacked the concept of the tablets, the stone tablets that were written on, and he just briefly asked a couple of questions, like, for instance, why did the Father write these weighty matters on tablets of stone? Surely with the flick of a finger he could have had parchments there, or he could have had some leather, like whatever, but he chose stone. And it was and he said that was a reflection of the Israelites' heart's conditions already, and of what they are busy doing down there at the bottom of the mountain. When he asked Moses, but do you even know what they are busy with here? And he wanted to destroy them. And he told Moses, but I'm going to kill them all, and I'm going to start over with you. And then obviously we know Moses came in and he kind of interceded for them and kind of reminded Father of his promises and what would the nation say of you. But the very interesting part to me, or the realization that I came to, was that Father already knew what was going to happen now. And on the way down, Moses was going down back to Israel with these 2 tablets of stone. And as he approaches them, he takes these stone tablets and he just basically throws them down and breaks it right in front of their eyes. And I find that very interesting, because that is where, if you start understanding the concept of the word I'm looking for, the covenant that was made, and the conditions that were set out in that ketubah, which was basically the 2 tablets. If he had not destroyed it before he actually read it out to them, they would have been subjected to the laws or the conditions of that marriage contract, which says that if you commit adultery, you have to die. So it was almost like he was protecting Israel by destroying those tablets instead of actually reading it out to them. And obviously then he went back up and received them again. But that's just, seeing that you're saying you're going to touch on this next week. I don't know if I'm going to be able to join, but that's just amazing, like the picture.
I was thinking when you said, like, I think of 3 verses in the New Testament which said, today when you hear the voice of God, don't harden your hearts. And this beautiful image that their hearts were hard, like people's hearts are hard. It has to be made soft by trusting God and becoming more like him. And it's super interesting that the first that you're right. He could have written it. He could have just downloaded it to Moses and telling him, go tell them this. But it was written in stone because it was an absolute manifest picture of their heart's condition. And then interesting that Jeremiah then says, there comes a day when I will write my instructions on your heart. And that's almost that whole complete picture of, in that day, you will have a reformed heart. Your heart of stone will be changed into a heart of flesh. So it's, typical in Hebrew, there's all of these layers. There's just so many things, but it's beautiful. Thank you. Awesome. Anybody else?
I have a question, please.
Yeah.
So mitzvah means commandments. Is that correct?
Mitzvah is one commandment. Mitzvot is
mitzvot.
The plural. Yeah.
Okay. So what is bar mitzvah?
Bar mitzvah means it means son of the covenant. So it's not a biblical term. It's a Jewish term. You get it. That's like a 13-year-old is known as a son of the covenant when he's gone through that rite of passage.
Yeah. Okay.
They have, by the way, they have it for the women as well. It's called a bat mitzvah. A bat is a daughter of the covenant. And bar, the word bar in Hebrew is one of two. Ben is a son and a bar is a son. So the Bible also uses bar, Shimon bar Yonah, Simon son of Jonah, and then and sometimes it calls it Yeshua ben, Adam ben Yosef, son of Joseph. So bar and ben is in the Bible also used interchangeably, but the term bar mitzvah doesn't occur anywhere in the Bible that I am aware of. Yeah. It's a Jewish cultural ritual.
Okay.
Good, thank you. Good question. By the way, you see, I've written here. Look for it, and then I'll see how we can get it out to everybody. But Dr. Frank Seekins, he speaks about this whole 10 Commandments and the heart of God. Man, it's just unbelievable, and how he explains the three first weighty matters, which is about God, and then there's the fourth one, which is about the Shabbat. And in Hebrew, the 4 is always got to do with the door, a port of entrance. And then he makes this connection where he says, once you understand what God is about, you're invited to go into his rest. Because if you don't enter his rest, your value system is skewed. Because from number 5 to number 10 is all about how do you value people and things. And it's brilliant, by the way. You can get Dr. Frank T. Seekins on the 10 Commandments or the 10 Matters. Amazing. Okay. We have to go now because I'm hungry. Ding, ding, ding. Anybody else? Say again. Oh, wie praat nou? Jean, heb jij nog gepraat? Sorry, stick up your hand. Then we know it's who's speaking.
Helmut, I had a request for maybe something we could do in the future. You know how you do that cool thing where you take a Hebrew word and you break it down into the symbols, and then you've got like a cow that's jumping over a doorway and getting a fish hook and all those cool things. Is there a method that you could teach us with that, or is it just a matter of like looking at the different pictures and then seeing what they mean and trying to come up with something that makes sense? I've been trying to do that a bit, and it's been quite tough to figure out how it's done properly.
Yeah. So my frustration, Stefan, is that method, you actually need a board where you can draw, and
right.
This is a frustration to me, but I know there's ways around it. You get people who like, what I would love is a camera that I can write it. And then I can show you when you get to the words, whatever, mitzvah, you have a mem, you have a tadi, you have a vav, you have a hey, and then you can say this is a possible reading based on the pictures. The one thing I want to say about that is unless you really deepen yourself into the Hebrew alphabet, this whole thing also have a layer that I feel one should just be cautious about it, because it's like Hebrew numerology. When people start discovering that some letters have numbers connected to them, it opens that whole Kabbalistic avenue, because our brains, remember, are just more mystic than the Hebrews. The Hebrews were very concrete, but because we're so abstract, even us reading the pictures always walks the thin line of misinterpreting it and giving it meaning what it doesn't necessarily. So yes, and we don't do bad by just talking about it. It's cool, the pictures look. But I almost feel like when God gives us grants us the grace to be together again, it might be easier to employ the pictures.
So that'll be great. Thank you.
Let's see. Maybe there is a way. Somebody needs to coach me. Anyway. Okay. Anybody else? But thank you. That's would be really helpful. Are we good? Senga, Thank you that you've joined, but you've missed out on the bulk of it. But we'll send you the recording if you're interested.
Thank you. Christy invited me. I'm at work, so I just kind of jumped in. So thank you.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you for being here. Okay, everyone. Love you. Stay safe and stay.
Dankie, Helmut.